Hello, I'm Eric Underwood, and I'm the Vocal Application Specialist here at Local Vocal North America. Today I was wanting to talk to you about proper vocal systems, filling cracks in concrete, moisture mitigation, what primers to use, and leveling compounds. So it's very important to test the moisture content whether you're going over wood or concrete substrates. There are several different test methods to measure the vapor emissions in the concrete. You have the ASTM 1869, which is the calcium chloride test, and you also have the ASTM 2170, which is the situ probes. So it's very important to moisture test on every job and take documentation of each job site. There are several different methods to measure the moisture content in the concrete. First, or one of them, you have the ASTM 2170, which is the situ probes, where you actually hammer drill into the concrete 40% of the slab depth, and it gives you the RH that's inside the slab. Another method that is quite often used is the ASTM 1869, which is the calcium chloride test, which tells you how many pounds of moisture is containing at the present time of install. So when you're dealing with concrete, it's always important to properly fill cracks in concrete. Why do we fill cracks in concrete? Well, the main reason we fill cracks in concrete is because that is a potential path for moisture to pass through. If we don't fill the cracks in concrete, that moisture can pass through and it can affect the adhesive and your hardwood flooring. So our crack filler, PS205, is designed for non-moving cracks and saw cuts. If you have a moving crack, I do not suggest that you install over that. Call a concrete engineer and have that addressed. The Vocal PS205 crack filler is our solution to repairing fractures in concrete before installation. The Vocal PS205 crack filler is a two-part silicate resin, part A and part B. The Vocal PS205 consists of part A and part B. You mix equal parts of both materials. It doesn't matter, you can pour part A into part B or vice versa. You can also have a separate bottle. You can mix it up equal parts. You don't have to mix up the whole bottle. Just make sure it's a 1-to-1 ratio, equal parts. For this demonstration, I'm going to pour all of part A into part B. So once I've poured all of the components into part B, I'm going to shake vigorously for at least 20 to 30 seconds. So if you see the top of the bottle on the PS205 crack filler, you'll see it's got different size tips determining whether you have a small fracture or a large fracture. So this stone right here has a pretty small fracture, so you can cut the very first one off. So once you have this mixed up properly, it's important to go ahead and have all this cleaned out prior to mixing this, because once you mix this up, you only have a certain amount of time where you can get this product into the fracture before this sets up on you. So I went ahead and went over here and vacuumed out. You want to vacuum out all of the fracture, make sure there's no debris that's going to stop the PS205 from penetrating to where it needs to go. You want to fill that crack completely to the top until it's overflowing. So once you've completely filled the crack in the concrete and it's overflowing, just take a regular putty knife, patch trowel, something flat, and all you're wanting to do is just rake off that excess like so. Once you've done that, you want to take a little bit of sand while the material's still wet. You just want to sprinkle some sand on top of that PS205 so it can actually dry in it. And once it's dry, we'll vacuum that off, and that'll give you a good rough surface that the moisture mitigation will stick to. When using Vaco PU280 or MS330 moisture barrier, it is crucial to have an absorbent substrate. So if you do not have an absorbent substrate, you need to mechanically clean the substrate by using either a shot blaster or a grinder to remove any adhesive residues or sealing compounds or curing compounds off of the slab so that the moisture mitigation system that you're using is able to penetrate into the capillary structure of the concrete. Such as PU280, that specific moisture barrier is designed to penetrate. So if you have adhesive residue or anything that can inhibit the PU280 from being able to penetrate, it must be mechanically removed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about ASTM F3191, and that's just a standard test method for testing the porosity of concrete or absorption. So I have a little water droplet. It's a simple test. All you do is put a single droplet of water onto the concrete slab. Within 60 seconds or less, that water droplet right there should fully absorb into the concrete slab. If you still have a puddle, even in part, after 60 seconds, then your concrete slab is non-absorbent, and you must go through the measures to making it absorbent. So today I want to talk a little bit about Vaco PU280 moisture barrier. The Vaco PU280 moisture barrier comes in a 2.5 gallon jug or a 1 gallon jug. You can get up to 400 square feet per gallon using the Loba Micro 6080 roller. So you can get about 1,000 square feet out of a 2.5, one coat, and then you can get 400 square feet out of a 1 gallon. Earlier we spoke about moisture testing in concrete. The Vaco PU280 moisture barrier is good for up to 12 pounds on the calcium chloride test, one coat, and up to 18 pounds on the calcium chloride, 2 coats. And it's also good for up to 98% RH if you're using the situ probes that we had discussed. So you can also use Vaco PU280 as a primer in a single coat application. You can use Vaco PU280 as a consolidator and a solidifier. You can use Vaco PU280 to solidify gypsum. You can also use the PU280 to consolidate cutback adhesive residue. Not only is Vaco PU280 moisture barrier just a moisture barrier, it can also be used for other things. For instance, if you're wanting to consolidate old cutback adhesive residue, you can use Vaco PU280 as a primer, and although it might offer some moisture protection, it is not considered a moisture barrier unless it can penetrate into the capillary structure of the concrete. Vaco PU280 can also be used to solidify gypsum underlayments. So you're going to want to shake up the PU280 really good before you open it. So shake it up really good. I always like to work out of a bucket. You don't have to, but we encourage you to work out of a bucket. It's just a cleaner job. Got a Vaco bucket here. Put a liner bag in there. That way you can save your bucket. So I've already shaken this PU280. And you're just going to want to pour some in the bucket. Just be careful none of it splashes back and gets in your eyes. That would not be good. Just like so. Make sure you put the cap back on there when you get done pouring it, because the Vaco PU280 is a moisture cured product. So if you leave that cap off, moisture is getting inside there and it's going to start setting up. So when applying the PU280 moisture barrier, the key is to apply it thin to win. You don't want to put on too much product. You think more is better, but in this scenario, it's really not, because it is a polyurethane product. So polyurethane naturally is going to foam. If you put it on too heavy, it's just going to bubble on you, and it's going to dry hard like that. So if you're doing it as a single coat application, We recommend doing cross-directional to make sure you have no dry spots, mist spots. You just want to make sure you have no puddles. But usually when I'm doing a 2-coat system, I'll usually roll one direction on the first coat, and then on the second coat, once it's dry, I'll come back and I'll roll the second coat perpendicular to this direction. I'm really trying to squeeze the product into the concrete slab. So we've opened up the slab, used a shot blaster or grinder. He was able to get the slab clean, dry, and absorbent. So now that you've done that, you're really trying to squeeze it and press all that material into the concrete. That way it can penetrate in there. If you roll it on too heavy, it's just going to look really, see how it's wanting to foam like that? You can see how it's wanting to foam really bad. You don't want that. So you want to take that and pull some of that material back. If you're wanting that 400 square foot per gallon coverage rate, thin to win. More is not better. I suggest always masking off cabinets and the kitchen cabinets with plastic. You don't want to get this PU280 on cabinets or anything because there's nothing that'll take it off other than sandpaper. So if you don't want it getting overspray on someone's cabinets, I suggest you masking them off. So we've talked a lot about PU280 over concrete, but I want to talk a little bit about going over OSB or wood or gypsum. So a lot of people ask, can I use PU280 as a moisture barrier on those substrates? So the answer is no. You don't ever want to use PU280 as a moisture barrier. A moisture barrier is called 2 coats. That calls for 2 coats. So if you're going over moisture sensitive substrates such as OSB, plywood, or gypsum, never, ever, ever do 2 coats of PU280. Always only 1 coat because you want to use it as a moisture retarder. You don't want to block moisture in plywood. You want to slow the rate of moisture through that plywood because wood needs a little bit of moisture. When leveling over a Vaco PU280 moisture barrier, it is important to use the right primer. In this scenario, we're going to use Vaco D3045 Special Primer. It is a dispersion-based primer with grit for enhanced adhesion. So it's important to always use D3045 Special Primer exclusively when going over Vaco PU280 moisture barrier. So when applying Vaco D3045 Special Primer, I'm using the same roller nap as we use on the PU280. It's the Micro 6080 roller. You don't want to apply too heavy of an application. If you do that, it's not going to hurt anything, you're just wasting material. So again, you're just wanting to apply a thin coat. As you can see, that's way too heavy. So I'm wanting to take that puddle and just push it out. It goes on pink, but once it's dry, it'll be clear. You'll no longer see the color in there. So the Vaco D3045 Special Primer can be used over PU280. It can also be used over plywood. You're just wanting a good even coat to coat the whole surface. And once it dries, the whole room will feel like 100 grit sandpaper. And it'll dry clear. So again, not too heavy. As you can see, that right there is about how you're going to want it. So now that we've filled the cracks in the concrete, we've put the PU280 moisture barrier down, and we've primed the surface, we're now ready for leveling compound. So this particular leveling compound I'm going to talk to you today briefly is the Vaco Z631 leveling compound. With this leveling compound, you can pour as minimal of 1/8 of an inch or up to 2 inches thick in one single pour. You're going to need a certain amount of tools to do this job. We actually have these Vaco mixing containers for sale, and it'll come with the mixing barrel, not the cart, but the mixing barrel, and it'll also come with a gauge rake, and this is just a measuring device. It's got skis on each side here, Phillips head screws. You can set how high you want to pour, whether it be 1/8 of an inch or all the way up to 2 inches, and then you lock down the screws. That's just a measuring device just to place the material. Once you have the material placed, you're going to come back with a smoothing trowel, and it's just a flat trowel, and that's just basically to fine tune what you've put down to break that surface tension and smooth out the product. You're also going to get portioning pails with it. The Vaco, this is the 5-quart portioning pail, and this is specifically for the Z631 leveling compound. As you can notice, it has the square cut out right here, so that's very important right there, and it keeps you from overwatering your leveling compound, so you can just work out of a big trash can full of water or a bucket, depending on how much leveling compound you're putting down. So when you're mixing up Vaco leveling compounds, it's crucial to have a good drill with a high RPM. This specific one is like 850 RPM. We require a minimum of 650 RPMs, but you're wanting a good quality drill so you can actually mix up that stuff and break up those polymers. The mixing paddle I'm using right now, as you can see, is kind of shaped like football. The reason that being is because we have this mixing kit and it has the dome shape to it. So if you're not mixing in one of these and you're mixing in like a regular bucket like this, you're not going to want to use this paddle. You're going to want to use something more like this right here so you can get around the perimeter of the bucket. Anytime on a leveling job, I go ahead and have my leveling job staged. Go ahead and have my bags open. Obviously I only have 2 bags today because I'm not pouring a whole lot, but on a big job I would go ahead and have them stacked up, leveled up like that, and go ahead and have the tops of them cut out. That way I don't have to fidget around with them. I can go ahead and grab them and put them in there. The more guys you can put on this, the easier your job's going to go. One thing I do recommend is getting the Vaco dust collector. If you're mixing inside, then it's crucial to have one of these. You don't want to dust out someone's place of business or someone's house. So first, as I mentioned before, the portioning pails, each bag requires 5 quarts of cold water. Never use hot water, or make sure your powder is never left outside where it can be exposed to sunlight. You want your powder to be cool and your water to be cool also. If your water is hot or your powder is hot or both, then it's just going to cut down your working time drastically. So I've already got a bucket here of water in there. Like I said before, it's got the square cut out. I'm just going to dip, hold it up level. It will pour out when it gets to the bottom there. That way you don't have to sit there with a hose pipe and wait on it to fill up. So I'm mixing 2 bags, so it's going to require 10 quarts of water. Once I get my water in there, I'm going to go ahead and pre-wet the walls so the powder does not stick. So whenever we start mixing, go ahead and start a timer, turn your vacuum on. So we're going to want to mix that for approximately 2 to 3 minutes. Now that we have it properly mixed, we're ready to start pouring floor. Push a little bit out. Go ahead and grab your gauge rake. You want to keep that thing flat. You don't want to angle it. If you angle it, you change how much material you're putting down. As you notice, I got cleats on. That way you can walk in the material. You don't want to walk in this flat-footed. That'll make a mess. So just get you some regular cleats, not metal, but just rubber cleats. Anytime you're mixing up leveling compound, you're going to want to make sure you're always pouring wet material into wet material. So as I'm already spreading this out, I've got 2 other guys mixing up another batch. Because if I let this set up, you're not going to want to try to pour wet material into material that's already starting to set up. It will not merge correctly. So whenever you have the leveling compound placed with the gauge rake, you can do one of two things. Some guys like the spike roller, some guys like the smoothing trowel. Doesn't matter, it's doing the same thing. All you're trying to do is fine tune it, basically break that surface tension. We got it placed, you're gonna walk through the material and you're not wanting to rake material out because you've already got set your height, but you're just basically wanting to break that surface tension of the leveling compound. Hard to do on a small panel, but you get the point. So now we've successfully filled cracks in concrete. We've put down PU 280 moisture barrier. We've done D3045 special primer. We've leveled. Now we have a perfectly flat, smooth, absorbent substrate to install your wood floor.